Have you ever wondered how far the boundaries of psychological manipulation can stretch before they cross into the realm of the unethical or even illegal? This thought-provoking question opens up a vast and somewhat murky world where psychology and morality intertwine in complex and often unsettling ways. Psychological manipulation, an influential art, can be wielded for both good and ill. It's a tool that can help a person grow, but when used unethically, it can cause profound harm. We'll be diving into this fascinating topic today, underscoring the importance of ethical considerations in psychology. There's a thin line that separates influence from manipulation, persuasion from coercion. But where does that line blur? Where does it cross into the territory of the unethical, or even the illegal? These are the questions we'll be exploring. Prepare to delve into the murky world of psychological trickery, where the line between right and wrong often blurs. The first unethical psychological trick is gaslighting. This term, coined from the 1944 film Gaslight, is a form of psychological manipulation where a person seeks to sow seeds of doubt in a target individual's mind, making them question their own memory, perception, or sanity. Imagine a scenario. You're certain you placed your keys on the table, but they're missing. Someone insists you never put them there. You're confused, but they're so adamant that you start doubting your own memory. That's a simplistic example of gaslighting. Gaslighting often happens in stages. At first, you might brush off these inconsistencies as misunderstandings or memory lapses. But as they become more frequent, you start to question your own reality. The manipulator might deny things that have happened or distort facts to fit their narrative. They might also use positive reinforcement to confuse their target, praising them one moment, then criticizing or belittling them the next. This unethical trick is commonly used in abusive relationships, where the abuser manipulates the victim into thinking they're at fault for the abuser's actions. It's also seen in workplaces, where it can be used to gain power or control. The danger lies in its subtlety. It's not always easy to identify, especially when the manipulator is someone trusted or loved. Gaslighting is considered unethical because it's a form of emotional abuse. It's used to gain power and control over another individual, often leading to a decrease in the victim's self-esteem and self-confidence. The end goal of gaslighting is to make the victim dependent on the gaslighter and to isolate them from others who might challenge the gaslighter's narrative. The effects of gaslighting can be severe, leading to anxiety, depression, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. Victims might feel a constant sense of confusion and fear, often questioning their own abilities and perceptions. Gaslighting can be extremely damaging, causing victims to question their own reality. So, be aware of this unethical psychological trick and remember, no one has the right to manipulate your reality. Next, consider the manipulative technique known as love bombing. This second unethical psychological trick is a deceptive and damaging ploy, where the manipulator showers their target with excessive affection, attention, and praise, all in an effort to gain control and influence. At the heart of love bombing is a powerful tool: emotion. As humans, we naturally crave love and attention, but when these are used as weapons, they can lead to considerable harm. The manipulator, often a narcissist or a person with a similar personality disorder, will use this trick to quickly gain your trust, making you emotionally dependent on their affection. So how does love bombing work? Imagine this. You meet someone new who seems absolutely perfect. They shower you with compliments, gifts, and affection, making you feel like the center of their universe. This is the bombing phase. They might express deep feelings or make grand promises early on, creating an intense whirlwind romance. But once the manipulator feels they have secured your emotional investment, the dynamic changes. This is the devaluation phase. The affection and attention you were once showered with becomes scarce, replaced by criticism and control. The shift can be jarring, leaving you confused, anxious, and desperate for the love that was once freely given. This dependency is exactly what the love bomber wants. Love bombing is considered unethical because it's a form of emotional manipulation. It preys on the victim's emotions, creating a cycle of dependency that can be hard to break. It's a trick that leverages the victim's vulnerability, turning their desire for love and connection into a tool for control. The effects of love bombing can be devastating, leading to emotional distress, erosion of self-esteem, and even trauma. It can leave victims feeling overwhelmed, confused, and dependent on the manipulator for validation and affection. In conclusion, love bombing is a clear abuse of psychological influence. It's a manipulative technique designed to exploit and control, leaving victims emotionally drained and psychologically dependent. It's crucial to recognize and understand these tactics to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Love bombing can leave victims feeling overwhelmed and dependent, a clear abuse of psychological influence. Another powerful yet unethical psychological trick is guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a manipulative tactic that uses someone's feelings of guilt to influence or control their actions. It's like a puppeteer pulling at the heartstrings to make the puppet dance. So how does it work? It's simpler than you might think. The manipulator will remind you of a past mistake, a favor they've done for you, or a responsibility you have towards them. They'll play on your sympathy, your empathy, and your sense of duty. It's a strong, potent weapon in their arsenal, often used to make you feel indebted and obligated. Imagine this scenario. A friend lends you a book, and months later, when they ask for a favor you're not comfortable with, they remind you of the book they lent you. Suddenly, you're caught in a web of guilt, feeling as though you owe them something in return. And why is this considered unethical? Well, it's because guilt tripping is fundamentally manipulative. It uses your emotions against you, turning your own conscience into a tool for someone else's gain. It's a strategy that puts the needs and wants of the manipulator above the person being manipulated, often leading to feelings of resentment, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. The impact of guilt tripping can be far-reaching. It can lead to strained relationships as the person on the receiving end begins to feel used and manipulated. It can also lead to unhealthy patterns of behavior, as individuals may start to act against their own interests to avoid feelings of guilt. Remember, guilt is a natural emotion that helps us maintain our social bonds by reminding us of our responsibilities towards others. But when it's used as a tool to manipulate, it crosses the line into unethical territory. Guilt tripping can lead to feelings of obligation and pressure, manipulating individuals into acting against their own interests. Always remember, it's okay to say no, even when someone tries to make you feel guilty for it. Stand your ground, and don't let guilt trips dictate your actions. Fear-mongering is our fourth unethical psychological trick. Now imagine walking through a dark, eerie forest. You hear an unexpected rustle in the bushes, your heart starts pounding, your palms sweat, fear grips you. This, my friends, is the power of fear. It's primal, intense, and can make us react in ways we usually wouldn't. Fear-mongering leverages this very emotion. It's the act of purposely and excessively disseminating fear to influence the behavior or attitudes of others. It's like holding a torch in that dark forest, controlling where people go by deciding where to cast the shadows. This psychological trick is frequently used in various spheres of life: politics, advertising, news media, even in personal relationships. Ever heard a politician warning of dire consequences if their opponent wins? Or an advertisement claiming that without their product, your health is at risk? That, my friends, is fear-mongering in action. But why is it considered unethical? Well, it's because fear-mongering manipulates people's innate survival instincts, clouding their judgment. It can lead to hasty, irrational decisions and actions. People may end up making choices they wouldn't had they been in a less fear-inducing environment. It's like being pushed into running aimlessly in the dark forest, not knowing where you're going or what you're running from. Moreover, fear-mongering can have severe psychological repercussions. Chronic exposure to fear can lead to anxiety disorders, paranoia, and a constant state of stress. It's like being trapped in that dark forest, the fear never leaving you, even when the real threat is long gone. And the worst part? Fear-mongering can be very subtle, often going unnoticed until the damage is done. It's like that quiet rustling in the bushes, which you only realize was just the wind, once your heart's already racing. Fear-mongering can cause unnecessary anxiety and distress, manipulating people through their most primal emotions. It's an unethical trick that plays with our basic instinct of survival, twisting it to serve someone else's purpose. It's a trick that should be known so it can be recognized and resisted, because no one should be manipulated by their fears. Now let's explore a psychological bias known as the halo effect. This is a mental shortcut that leads us to assume that because a person has one positive trait, they must have others. It's like seeing someone with a halo, hence the name. It's a natural tendency, just part of how our brains work. But here's where it becomes dicey. Some people, knowing about the halo effect, can manipulate it to their advantage. They might present themselves in a positive light, appearing friendly, attractive, or successful, to make you assume they're also honest, kind, or intelligent. They're banking on the fact that we often judge a book by its cover, so to speak. Imagine a charismatic politician who uses their charm to win votes, despite a lack of experience or qualifications. or perhaps a salesperson who uses their good looks to sell a subpar product. This is the halo effect in action, and it's not always used for noble purposes. The halo effect is considered unethical because it can lead to deception and manipulation. It can cloud our judgment, making us overlook important details or red flags. It can make us favor certain individuals over others, not based on merit, but on superficial traits. In the workplace, it can result in unfair hiring practices. In the legal system, it can influence jury decisions. In our personal lives, it can affect our relationships. It's a powerful tool, and in the wrong hands, it can cause a lot of harm. It's important to be aware of the halo effect, to recognize when it might be influencing your decisions. Don't let someone's charm or good looks fool you. Look deeper, ask questions, and make sure you're judging people on their character and actions, not their appearance or charisma. The halo effect can lead to unjustified trust and favoritism, skewing judgments and decisions. It's a subtle yet powerful trick, and one that we should all be aware of. Our sixth unethical psychological trick is the bait and switch. Imagine being lured into a situation or agreement with the promise of something appealing, only to have the situation change drastically once you're committed. This, in essence, is the bait and switch technique. It's a form of deception that relies heavily on the initial bait, an attractive offer that draws you in. Once you're hooked, the switch occurs. The reality of the situation is revealed to be far different from what was originally promised. This technique isn't just used in the world of sales and marketing, where a product or service is advertised at a low cost to attract customers, only to be replaced with a more expensive or inferior product. It's also used in personal relationships and social interactions. For instance, a person might present themselves in a certain way to attract a partner, only to reveal their true, less appealing characteristics once the relationship is established. The effects of the bait and switch can be quite damaging. It can lead to feelings of betrayal, anger, and disappointment. It can cause individuals to question their judgment and lose confidence in their decision-making abilities. This is because the bait and switch exploits our natural tendency to trust and engage with others, especially when an attractive offer is presented. The reason this trick is considered unethical is clear. It's a form of manipulation that takes advantage of people's trust and goodwill. It intentionally misleads people, creating false expectations to achieve a desired outcome. This is a clear violation of respect for individual autonomy and honesty, principles that are fundamental to ethical interactions. So why is it so effective? The bait and switch works because it taps into our inherent desire for gain. We're naturally drawn to attractive offers and opportunities, but when these turn out to be deceptive, it can leave us feeling cheated and exploited. The bait and switch can lead to feelings of betrayal and distrust, exploiting people's willingness to engage. Keep this in mind the next time something seems too good to be true. It just might be a bait and switch in disguise. The seventh unethical psychological trick is the false dilemma. This maneuver is a masterclass in manipulation, presenting only two options when, in fact, there are many more. It's a powerful tool used to control and influence decisions, often leaving the person on the receiving end feeling cornered and without a choice. A false dilemma, also known as a binary fallacy or a black and white fallacy, works by deliberately reducing the number of options to just two. This can be done subtly or overtly, but the end game is always the same: to control the outcome. Imagine a scenario where a boss tells an employee, either you work over the weekend or you're not committed to this job. The boss is setting up a false dilemma. There are other options like discussing workload management or exploring the possibility of overtime pay, but these choices are conveniently left out of the conversation. In relationships, a partner may say, "If you loved me, you would do this for me." Again, this is a false dilemma. Love isn't a binary choice between doing everything someone wants or not caring about them at all. There's a vast spectrum of possibilities that this manipulative statement completely disregards. Why is this considered unethical? Well, it's manipulative and dishonest. It's a way of controlling people's decisions by limiting their perceived options. It's not about helping someone see the full range of possibilities, but about forcing them into a particular direction. This tactic can be incredibly damaging. It can lead to people feeling trapped, making decisions they're not comfortable with, and living in a constant state of stress or anxiety. It can also damage relationships, create unhealthy work environments, and even lead to serious mental health issues. It's important to recognize when you're being presented with a false dilemma. If you feel like you're being forced to choose between two extremes, take a step back. Ask yourself, Are there other options? Often the answer will be yes. The false dilemma can limit people's freedom of choice, forcing them into a corner. So, let's continue to shed light on these unethical psychological tricks to promote healthier interactions and decisions. Next, we have an unethical manipulation of group dynamics known as the bandwagon effect. This trick is a psychological phenomenon where people tend to do something primarily because others are doing it, regardless of their own beliefs or values. It's like jumping on a bandwagon just because everyone else is. It's human nature to want to fit in, to be part of a group, and this is exactly what the bandwagon effect exploits. Now let's delve into how this effect is exploited. Consider a scenario where a person is trying to persuade a group to adopt a particular viewpoint or action. They might start by influencing a few key people in the group. Once these individuals join in, others start to follow suit, not because they necessarily agree, but because they don't want to be left out. This is the bandwagon effect in action. This manipulation is considered unethical because it takes advantage of our innate desire to belong. It pushes people to conform to group norms, often leading them to make decisions they wouldn't have made otherwise. It can be used in harmful ways, such as promoting harmful behaviors, spreading misinformation, or even inciting fear and hatred. Moreover, the bandwagon effect can suppress critical thinking. When everyone else is thinking or acting in a certain way, it can be challenging to voice a differing opinion. This can lead to groupthink, where people blindly follow the majority, stifling innovation and individuality. The bandwagon effect is not just prevalent in our day-to-day social interactions, but it's also exploited in various areas like politics, marketing, and even in our online interactions. Politicians use it to rally support, marketers use it to create a sense of popularity around their products, and social media platforms use it to promote trending topics. In conclusion, the bandwagon effect is an unethical psychological trick because it exploits our natural desire to fit in, leading us to make decisions that are not always in our best interest. It can lead to groupthink and peer pressure, suppressing individuality and independent thinking. So the next time you find yourself going along with the crowd, take a moment to question why. Is it because you genuinely agree, or is it because you're under the influence of the bandwagon effect? Our ninth unethical psychological trick is the authority bias. We all have an ingrained tendency to follow the lead and opinions of those we perceive as authority figures. It's a survival mechanism, wired deep into our psyche. It's called the authority bias, and it can be a powerful tool for manipulation when wielded unethically. The authority bias stems from our early upbringing. Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're taught to respect and obey figures of authority: parents, teachers, doctors, and so on. It's an efficient way for societies to function, but it can also be exploited. Consider the case of a salesperson, dressed in a doctor's white coat, recommending a particular health supplement. Despite no genuine medical expertise, the symbolic authority of the coat can sway our judgment, leading us to trust and potentially purchase the product. Or imagine a scenario where a charismatic leader uses their position of power to espouse harmful ideologies. Their followers, influenced by the authority bias, might accept these ideas without question, leading to potentially dangerous outcomes. This is where the authority bias becomes unethical. It's a manipulation of trust, an exploitation of our instinctual respect for authority. It's used to sell products, ideologies, and even to justify actions that, under a critical lens, might be seen as unjust or harmful. But why is it considered unethical? Because it undermines our capacity for critical thinking. It discourages us from questioning, from seeking evidence, from making independent decisions based on our principles and understanding. It leads to blind obedience, and that can have grave consequences. The key to countering this bias is awareness. Understanding that just because someone holds a position of authority, it doesn't mean their advice or viewpoint is infallible. We must always question, always seek evidence, and always think critically. The authority bias can lead to blind obedience, undermining critical thinking and personal autonomy. Finally, we have the sunk cost fallacy. This is a psychological phenomenon that plays on our instinctive aversion to loss. It's the idea that we are more likely to continue an endeavor if we have already invested time, effort, or money into it, even if continuing is not the best course of action. Imagine you've been waiting in line for a concert for hours, only to find out that the band isn't going to perform. But you decide to stay anyway, because you've already spent so much time waiting. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action. Now, how is it exploited? Well, businesses, politicians, and even manipulative individuals can use this fallacy to their advantage. Let's say you've spent a significant amount of money on a subscription service that you don't even use anymore. The service provider might remind you of how much you've invested, pushing you to keep the subscription going. The fear of losing your initial investment can pressure you into making decisions that are against your best interest. Similarly, politicians may justify continuing a failing policy by emphasizing the resources already devoted to it, swaying public opinion in favor of maintaining the status quo. Even in personal relationships, someone might use this fallacy to make you stay in an unhealthy situation just because you've already invested so much time and emotion into it. So, why is this considered unethical? It's because the sunk cost fallacy manipulates our natural inclination to avoid loss. It traps us in unproductive or even harmful situations. It distorts our decision-making process, leading us away from what is objectively best for us. Moreover, it's unethical because it exploits our vulnerabilities. It takes advantage of our emotional investment, our time, and our resources. It manipulates us into thinking that we must continue on a chosen path, simply because we've already started down it. The sunk cost fallacy can lead to irrational decision-making, trapping individuals in unproductive situations. So it's crucial to be aware of it, to recognize when someone is trying to exploit this fallacy, and to make decisions based on the present and future, not just the past. As we've seen, psychology can be a powerful tool, but it can also be misused in unethical ways. The 10 tricks we've delved into today, from gaslighting to the sunk cost fallacy, are prime examples of how psychological tactics can be distorted to manipulate and control. These methods, while potent, cross the line into unethical territory and serve as a stark reminder of the importance of ethical considerations in psychology. The power of psychology should never be underestimated, nor should it be wielded irresponsibly. It's a field that holds the potential for great benefit, but also for great harm if misused. Being aware of these tricks, not to exploit others, but to protect oneself and promote ethical interactions, is crucial. Remember, it's crucial to use psychological knowledge responsibly and ethically. After all, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.